Hi, this is the Magnificent Midlife podcast and I'm Rachel Lancaster. This is where we celebrate women in midlife and beyond. We challenge the status quo and bash those negative stereotypes about being an older woman. We're not over the hill at 40, 50, 60. We're just getting started. And the world needs us now more than ever. I'll be talking all things midlife, about issues that matter, and sharing fabulous stories of amazing women doing very cool stuff. Now is our time. Oh my goodness. Welcome to the 100th episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. And I thought I had to do something pretty special today to celebrate. So I have invited the very first man on the podcast, and not just any man, but my man, Mr. Magnificent himself, Mark Estdale. So welcome, Mark.
Hello, and it's nice to be here.
My goodness.
Because we're sitting together, Bogey, our beloved cat, has come to sit next to us. So I think Bogey will be purring all the way through this.
Yeah, so there might be a bit of background noise, but I reckon he's our support animal because doing this is actually quite vulnerable and we're both slightly nervous. We don't know quite how it's going to go, but we're also very excited. So first of all, I am going to kick off with asking my beloved, why did you agree to come on my podcast?
Because you asked me. It's been an interesting journey watching you write the book and do the podcast and set up Magnificent Midlife. And there's a massive amount I've learned. And I think the work you're doing is really important for men because we don't understand women. You know, we're never taught. We're never taught about menstrual cycles or menopause or anything like that. So it has been a journey, and it's been the most enlightening journey. And actually sharing my journey with my friends as you have shared your journey with your community has been inspiring, actually. You know, we don't think we're stuck in really just getting on with life without thinking too much about it. And because of your journey and the way you've wanted to share your journey has made me stop and think and consider and enter in with you, you know, your experience. You know, I remember when we first went to see Ashton Applewhite, you know, on ageism, and I sat there and she said, you know, ageism is prejudice against your future self. And I think for me, a lot of your journey has been, whoa, I hadn't thought about that. And there's so many things that, you know, we need to see. You know, I want more, actually. And it's been, you know, I feel really privileged and empowered. And I think it's something, you know, that guys, men should embrace because it is so powerful. How our relationship has evolved over this last, 14 years now? 16 years? How long have we been together?
Well, it's 16 years
16
we've been together.
Years, yeah.
And it's 14 years since I got the early menopause diagnosis.
Yeah.
So
it's been a long time.
But it was very early into our relationship, wasn't it? It was just, we were literally 2 years and then we were hit with that.
It's been quite a kind of roller coaster of learning and exploring stuff, and it's a powerful story to tell and share. It's a very empowering story, I think, because the place we are now is better than it's ever been, and you want all relationships to be evolving like that, I guess.
Wow. I didn't pay him to say that, I promise. Wow, my goodness me. And I think you've been very accommodating of me, being so public about sharing this. Not everybody would have been so accommodating. I do talk about you in the book, and I
talk about you on the podcast, and you've kind of rolled with the punches on that. So thank you for doing that. Can't have been easy sometimes, perhaps a bit uncomfortable.
Yes, and if my kids are listening, put their hands over their ears, or go and do a Clash karaoke and sing London's Calling to the top of their lungs right now. Because, the whole thing about the vasectomy and, and sex have been things that are featured in the podcast. And I think it's really important to talk about those things, being open about our journey, because it's when people are open, you learn.
Maybe we start with, a lot of people know that I got this early menopause diagnosis.
Yeah.
They may not know how that came about. So you and I met. It's the second marriage for both of us. We've been married for 11 years. And we both promised that we'd never get married ever again. So it was the triumph of hope over experience, which, touch wood, seems to be doing all right so far. Although we have not had an easy time. But I desperately wanted another child. So I had one child and I desperately wanted another one. And I'd been trying to find a man who would be willing to have a baby with me.
That wasn't me.
It wasn't him, no, because one, he had 3 children, and 2, he had a vasectomy. So, but by that stage, I'd already sort of fallen for him hook, line and sinker. So that wasn't going to work. So then this amazing man, which I've written about in the book, he agreed to go and have a reverse vasectomy.
Me?
Yeah, you. Who else?
Well, you said this amazing man, and it's just
this
like,
one sitting on the sofa over there. That was a pretty major thing to do. And so I went to have the hormone test, and then I was told that I got the hormonal profile of a postmenopausal woman, and suddenly the sky fell in, didn't it? It was it was crazy. And if you've read the book and if you've listened to me on here, you'll know that for a time I managed to reverse that diagnosis. It was only about for 9 months, and it was everything that I learned to do that then put me on this course to want to tell people about how they can have much more control over their hormones and their hormonal health and balance. But initially, and even later on, it was very difficult, wasn't it? But I think it was because what we heard from Ashton in terms of ageism is prejudice against your future self. And I had subscribed, bought into all of those narratives about what menopause meant. I didn't know what menopause was to start with, but I knew it happened to old women, not to me, who was just into a new relationship and, was obviously sort of feeling the call of needing to procreate. So it was, it was a difficult time, wasn't it? But it was, So you tell me, why did you agree to have the reverse, and then how did you feel when it didn't work? We didn't manage to make another baby together, and that was sad. It was really sad, wasn't it?
When we first met, we already had 4 amazing kids between us. And I'd already had the vasectomy, as you said. I had twins the second time round, and it was straight to see the man with 2 bricks. And, I had no intention of having more children. But when I met you, the whole idea of having a child that had come out of our relationship, I thought would be rather magnificent. So the decision to have the reversal was quite easy, really. But then when you had the diagnosis of being menopausal, that was a tough time. Not only was it the grief of not being able to have a child, it was all the narratives I think women get, which I was really not aware of. The narratives about young is beautiful, about, your life's over, you become invisible. as if you didn't exist, you have no value anymore. And the compound effect of the ageism, the sexism, the sexism in the workplace that you'd experienced. And, when you were getting depressed, it was like, well, no bloody wonder. Seeing that depression evolve into research and into anger, this has got to change. And then the lack of information about menopause, the lack of education about menopause. It was as if it was a dirty word, like going to the doctor and just getting, antidepressants. Get on with it. Just the absurdity of the narratives. It was just like, holy moly. I empathized with you, really, because you were so articulate. And, the way you were sharing it with myself and going, you were ranting around the house a lot of the time. And then when you, started the Mutton Club and the magazine and started the talking and doing the little conferences, that was enlightening. And I loved, going along and meeting other women and this whole thing about, reinvention or, people discovering their power and stepping into their power in midlife, being off the hormonal roller coaster, as it were. I have 2 daughters. It's knowing, their experience, but never experiencing that as a man. We never experience that up and down that women experience. And there's the other stuff that you're digging into now is mind-blowing for me. The book on the menstrual cycle, I can't remember the title.
Yeah, Wild Power.
Wild Power is extraordinary wake-up call.
That when women live cyclically, I can't even say it. Cyclically. when we actually embrace the cycle, then there is enormous power that comes from that cycle. And yet modern life doesn't work in that way for women. We're supposed to be able to function 28 days without those cyclical movements, and that's where we get into trouble. And what I found so interesting about that book, which we did buy for the girls, didn't we, is that actually if we can be more in tune with our cycle and more in tune with what our body is doing over the cycle, then we are in a much better position when we get to menopause than if we've completely ignored that and just tried to pretend that it doesn't matter and doesn't exist. All this stuff that I want to share.
I was listening to that podcast you did quite recently. Was it the one about procrastination, when she was talking about the menstrual cycle, and it was the history of hiding women away when they were having their period. It was just,
it still happens in some
places.
And it
still happens, and it's just the societal attitudes. For me, it's been so powerful.
I feel I really missed out because I didn't know about it until I've discovered it literally in the last year. I had no idea.
Well, I think we all miss out. That isn't part of education. Education should be about empowering and awareness. It's like menopause. I have never been taught about menopause. It's not, I don't think it's on the school agenda now.
It is now.
It is now.
Well, it is in the UK, but we're way ahead of everywhere else in the world.
But those things, just who we are and how we function, is really important. And it gives us a greater insight rather than just dismissing people without understanding. But I think for guys, the changes are, if you're not aware, you think about yourself and what's going wrong. If you're not informed, if you don't understand, you come to conclusions, and most conclusions you come to tend to be negative, I think. So why is somebody acting differently? They've always been like this and now they're doing this. Why? What's wrong with me? That's the kind of, the paranoia of it. And then it all kind of breaks down, especially if both parties are not really aware.
I think that was something that we talked about, wasn't it, when we were prepping this, that you wanted to talk about the fact that, so many relationships do break down around this time. Yeah. And I think it is because of that lack of understanding. And I think if we both, I'm talking obviously mainly about heterosexual relationships, but if both the man and the woman can embrace this time of transition and move away from the overwhelmingly negative narratives, because I saw it as negative, you probably saw it as negative. I wanted to talk about, I remember I went on a podcast, there were 3 male hosts, and it was FKU 50 podcast, and I wanted to talk about all these amazing things that happen to women during midlife and menopause, and how we become more powerful, and it's a transformational time, and all they wanted to talk about was sex, and all they wanted to talk about was the problems with sex. And I think also that yes, and kids, do put your hands over your ears, because our sexual relationship, it's not the same as it was before.
No.
It's different. It has evolved like every other aspect of our relationship. But that doesn't make it worse, does it?
No, actually, I think it's way better in many ways. Because that whole thing of having to relearn and being sensitive to each other has been very powerful. And yes, it has changed. One of the things that I think about is a lot of the data people quote around this time. For instance, the suicide figures in the 40s. It peaks for both men and women, but how what I would call the HRT lobby have put the heightening suicide rate in the 40s down to menopause. And there are so many additional factors that are involved in that. So when children leave home and relationships break down there, and it's not just menopause, there's so many other factors. And it was really interesting in your latest podcast, I can't remember her name.
Clarissa.
Yeah.
Clarissa Christensen.
I loved the pair of you, because it was just, it was like having 2 of you. I'm so...
That would be a nightmare though, wouldn't it?
No, but I've so enjoyed your journey. You've had an incredible life experience of dealing with the hormonal rollercoaster, which you've been forced on. And now you're into still waters. And once you enter those still waters, by heck, there's some beautiful and powerful women there, because they're in those still waters and they have real life experience, way beyond the life experience of men, way beyond. And you have immersed yourselves in those women. Yeah. And then you've got the narrative of stay on HRT, stay on the roller coaster, stay juicy and all that kind of stuff. And it's just like, an HRT saved my life. Yeah, it's a bit like some of the narratives about drugs in the past, about cocaine and amphetamine use. How liberating they were, and, you get over exhaustion and you can just, you don't need to sleep, you can just take the drugs. And you're just going, no, drugs ain't the fix for chemical abuse, or chemical use, as it was. The real remedy is good night's sleep. And I think that narrative within your work is so important, because you get these, you get loads of people who are going on and go, HRT's great, As you say, it's like a wake-up call. Menopause being a wake-up call is so... I'm just ranting here. I'm just rambling on. You chip in, because I'm an observer from the outside, and I'm just going, oh wow.
I know, but I have to say, listeners, you can now, just from listening to Mark, you can see where I get the support and the drive to be able to get on my soapbox. Because if I was doing it, sometimes I do feel I'm just doing it, and I feel like I'm the child with the emperor's not got any clothes on, and I'm the child saying he's not got any clothes on. And sometimes I do feel like that, but at least at home I have somebody who understands and who sees it from my perspective, and we don't always agree, but that's the joy of it. And I was thinking, one of our tenets, the two of us, is stay curious, isn't it? I'm always saying that on the podcast, and I very much get that from you as well, that we are both curious. So rather than seeing a change as negative, we explore it and we dig into it and we think, okay, what can we do with this? Yeah. Where can it go? Where can it take us?
Yeah.
And that's, I think, a very powerful thing that we share, isn't it?
Yeah, I love it, actually. You know, I think we get really suspicious when somebody preaches.
Although I preach, you did say to me the other day, you preach.
I know. Well, you know what? You give options. You know, the lovely thing you do is, you know, you're always telling, you know, you're always challenging me. You're always challenging me, you know, about, you know, my exercise and what I eat and all that kind of sense, which is completely fine. But you don't ram it down my throat. You know, I get every article you read, you'll forward to me, you know, and say. However, it's, you know, I love the curiosity and the vulnerability and the kind of hypotheses of your work. It's not, this is the way it is and, you know, A or B. You're not selling something.
No, I've got nothing to sell apart from ideas.
No, yeah, and it's disturbing when you see people selling hard and taking data instead of being curious about the data. They're shaping the data into their sermon. You know, especially around all the issues surrounding HRT. I've read some articles recently, they're saying, and I'm just going, you're trying to make me afraid. If I was a woman, I would be afraid by what you're saying. But when you look at what they're actually saying, they're just preaching and taking stuff out of context to make a very compelling message. And it's just like all the extremist nonsense you get in social media or in politics. And I find it really depressing, and I love the vulnerability, and you know, these are complex issues, and you know, there isn't a black or white, there isn't a duality to it,
and it isn't either or as well. Yes. On the HRT front. But what worries me is that people, they do want a panacea, they do want something to fix it.
Yeah, of course we do.
And then,
or don't we do?
They take the HRT without doing all the other stuff, which is what I talk about ad nauseum. You know, the diet, the lifestyle, everything else. And I realise actually that I just lied. I do have something to sell. I have my book. So I have my book. Yeah. And actually, to celebrate this 100th episode, I have, if you listen to this episode, as you are listening to it, obviously, because you're hearing me say this, if you go to magnificentmidlife.com/book, you can choose the ebook or the audiobook. And if you use the code podcast, all caps, 100 numerals, so podcast 100, you can get 50% off my ebook or my audiobook, narrated by me, and also it was narrated by me in your recording studio, because I didn't introduce what you do. You are a voice director and you direct actors for video games, and you have your own recording studio. So I was very blessed to be able to do that.
I've contributed in very minor way, if at all, to what you're doing, though. You know, it's kind of been very independent.
I don't know.
I don't know.
Oh,
You teach me stuff.
You're my sparring partner for all of these ideas. So how have I changed over this period? What are the good things and maybe not so good things that you've seen over what is now 14 years since that initial diagnosis that kind of changed everything, didn't it?
Yeah, well, Bogey the cat was significant in helping. Yeah.
Why? Why was he significant?
Bogey, we decided to get a cat because we couldn't have a child, of course.
He was the baby substitute,
yes, the audience
wasn't
need
he?
to know, don't they? Yeah, there is that. So he's our substitute baby, and I just love the way he just comes, and every time we sit down together, he comes and sits with us. So, yeah, how have you changed? You found your mojo. You know, in questioning everything, really, all the female narratives, it's just made you so much more powerful. I see you grow all the time, you know, more articulate, more feisty, more energized, you know, more positive. And, you know, the people that you're engaging with are, you know, like-minded spirits in this world. And I think we need you lot. The world, you know, like in the beginning of the podcast, you know, the world needs us now more than ever, as you say, is absolutely the essence of it. You know, I think you have so much to offer, and it's just like, for me, I'm really enjoying this stage of our relationship together and our life together, because it is meaningful in ways that weren't there before. So what about yourself? You know, how do you think you've changed?
Well, I know I've changed massively, but I feel like I'm becoming the person I was always supposed to be. I do feel, in a certain woo-woo sense, that this was kind of my destiny, and that, you know, the early menopause happened for a reason. And there's a wonderful quote that I've become aware of recently, and I think it's Steve Jobs, and it's about not being able to connect the dots looking forward, but you can connect them looking back. So when you're not sure what's going on and all the silliness that might be happening in your life, you've got to trust that the dots will connect when you're looking back in the future, which I think is a wonderful idea, because if, you know, all of that awfulness at the very beginning, if I had understood what was going on, and if I'd been able to connect the dots and see a future that has turned out as it has, then it would have been a lot easier for me, which is partly why I do what I do in terms of mentoring and everything, because I want women to see the possibilities. And I'm always saying, aren't I, that the end of my fertility has actually become the most fertile time of my life. And I have another baby substitute in the book. The book was my baby. Yeah. And it was a bit longer birthing than a baby. It took 2 years, and there was a year in there where it was difficult. It was COVID, and, you know, it was a difficult time, and I just couldn't get it finished. But then eventually I did get it finished. And so I would never have written a book before. So, you know, and I would never have done a podcast before.
I'm looking forward to the second one.
Yeah, there's another one. The stories to inspire. That's
it's just
smart too.
That condensing. You know, you've talked about the new book quite a bit, and condensing some of the stories from the podcast. I'm looking forward to it, because they are fantastic stories.
But other things I've learned. Flaxseed, ground flaxseed.
Brown flaxseed.
Ground, not brown, brown. You can be brown, but golden flaxseed. I think it's absolutely brilliant. I think all women should have it every day. And
why is that? Why is this flaxseed?
Because it's.
I know you have it.
It's the most dense form of natural plant phytoestrogens, which I think really help support our hormonal balance.
Is that right?
Yep. But it's also full of other good things for bone health and this, that and the other. I don't know exactly. I should know all of the different things, but it's omega-3 and it keeps you regular as well.
Oh,
So it's really, really good. And yoga and exercise, we have to do more and more of it the older we get. And yoga is amazing. Alcohol is not your friend as you go through menopause, which is really annoying because I like a drink, but it's not your friend. No. And it's interesting because recording this, I'm 2 weeks into not drinking and I feel so much better. Yeah. I really do.
So far, flaxseed, exercise, yoga.
Yeah, that is exercise.
Yeah, I just suppose so. And cutting down on the alcohol have been major things you've learned.
Yeah, and also those shoes, what are they?
Shoes.
Barefoot shoes. Yeah. Barefoot shoes, yes, we've both discovered those, haven't we? So
I did for health reasons.
Yeah, what I've done too, but they've helped my posture, I'm sure of it. I used to have really bad sciatica, and I still get it occasionally, but the shoes are really good, so I wear those most of the time.
Are we turning into hippies then?
Yes, definitely.
Barefoot shoes and flaxseed, yeah.
We always were. We're not vegetarian though, we like good meat, don't we? All right, so we're going to wind up now because I think they've heard us prattling on long enough. But I would like to ask you,
go on.
What do you want other men to know about their partner's menopause transition? What's your advice?
Listen. It's a hard one. It's because you've got that research element to you in your bones. You know, you want to know why things are the way they are. When things are different for you, you're curious. And I don't think all people are curious. They're just reacting. When your partner's reacting, it's really hard. It's hard to be as supportive as you can be because you're curious. That journey has been really easy for me. You know, I've been really privileged to be here. I guess for us men, for other men, is be curious. Don't knock it. This is a natural process of being freed from the freed from the cycle. It's a kind of messy break that puts your partner into a different space. They're evolving. You're getting a new partner. You know, that's what it is. You're getting a new partner. Just watch and let it grow. It can be tough. The more connected you are with people who've experienced it as well, helps. You know, because I've been talking to all the other guys about menopause and menopausal partners. Yeah, let's go to the pub and talk about the menopause. Really powerful. It is absolutely powerful and informative. You know, it's liberating, actually. Yeah, guys, pause. Be the men that pause, I guess. Be the men that pause.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the Magnificent Midlife podcast. If you enjoyed it, please subscribe, follow and share it. Also, giving a 5-star review really helps get the word out. You'll find the show notes at magnificentmidlife.com. That's also where you can get my book, Magnificent Midlife, Transform Your Middle Years, Menopause and Beyond. Make the very best of your next chapter. Help me change the world, one magnificent midlife woman at a time.